Hello, good evening. I am Elsa Fernandes, architect again by profession, like Arminio. We've done a few discussions with a lot of people from Panjim on various topics, which we need to access in terms of information. We need to generate our opinions so that we have our own understanding and our own share in the vision of our city. If we don't play that role, we will be falling short of the expectation that the future may have from our generation. And I don't think any of us are willing to fall short on that. If any youngsters are there, I would compliment them to be here, because these are very short interactions which give you a whole opening into a lot of details that maybe we don't read about in different options of material that is available to us. So this is a small part about the Jetty policy. I would expect each one of you would have gone through it. If not, few things that I would highlight may interest you all. The first thing that we may want to think about a jetty policy is, we are indoors. We are in the interiors of the city, and the jetty will be at the coast. If that is the kind of disconnect you feel with the coast, then let me tell you that even the Mandavi river could visit us if it wishes to, because Panaji city is a waterfront city. It has a long coast along the Mandavi. And we cannot disconnect ourselves assuming that that is what is happening along the coast and in the waters, so be it. It is going to impact. It's going to impact not just merely the coast, it's going to impact the biodiversity, it's going to impact the land, it's going to impact the water, it's going to impact the air, it's going to impact the daily services that each one of us draws from having to live in the city. So if we see from Santa Monica Jetty to the ferry wharf, that's about 2 kilometers roughly. And I don't think any of us are actually accessible to the waterfront within this space, because it's already captured. Whether it's captured through procedural follow-ups, through overriding powers, this is a completely another topic by itself. We may have to access information for that. But limiting myself to the jetty policy, let us look even further from the ferry wharf to the next point, the Miramar Circle. Partly congested, but is still available. And that might just be the next step in line. And if that is so, then we may have to put some dots together into what these documents are presented to us as policies. Policies are visions. Visions from the time that we live into the time that somebody else will live, so that they, when they think of the past and they say, okay, this generation thought to make the Panjim city into this, and therefore we have it in our plate today. And then we can comment whether that was a good decision or not. Like the way we do, and we comment about our predecessors. So these are the times that allow us that little bit of space to understand this transition. And to take you further, if I show you I don't know if you can do this little bit of Google study and see how the waterfront has been actually shielded from the residents or from the people, from the public, and a lot of interventions have been created along the jetty. We probably might not even be aware of these interventions. If you actually go there or maybe Google the locations, we may be able to access. And then we may see that, okay, I never thought this was there, I never thought that was there, and still all these interventions are there. They are there, they are built, they have been handed over, they are under operation. And still there seems to be longing for more, and that more is being presented in policies. As far as the jetty policy is concerned, there are issues, various issues. A few of them I would want to highlight. Of course, we are already past the date of responding in terms of public notification, but yet I'm sure if the city residents decide that we need to have a common ground on which we have to decide on a vision for the city, then this needs consideration. So there's a committee, and the committee has been revamped on 2 of the membership. That's the third last and the second last. Coastal Police and River Navigation Department have been added on into the JMC. It was always there since 2016. Those 2 characters have been added there. So instead of a 5-member committee, we have an 8-member committee, because Goa Boat Cruises Association have been also added with 1 member. So this 8-member committee, which appears to be more of tourism stakeholders, are going to take all the decisions about the coast of Panjim, the coast of Goa, because it's a policy for the state of Goa. And if you see, then we look at what are their powers and we look at their competencies, and there's a huge gap. There's a gap between their abilities and the tasks which have been assigned to them. And we also read into the policy document that these were self-recommended. The JMC 2016 self-recommended themselves into these positions of a unified jetty policy. Under that title, all these powers have been pushed into these. So whatever happens to the land use planning, whatever happens to the otherwise density planning, otherwise infrastructure planning, we assume that this committee has the competency to deal with it all. And therefore, I have listed on the right side there all of these powers which are under some keywords have been put in charge for this 8-member committee. Besides also allowing them the conflict of interest. Because as a tourism stakeholder, whether they will look after their business, whether they will look after their economic interest, or they are going to look after the environmental interest, the interest of the city, the interest of the planning, land use planning, and all of these are competencies which we don't see with this 8-member committee. So there's a clash, there's a gap in the ability as well as the conflict of interest in which this committee is going to decide so. Even if they had the competencies, the conflict would make the whole process a sham. So we are looking at this situation, and all of the jetty policy powers have been handed over to this 8-member committee. So if the jetties are growing and this committee is going to decide its carrying capacity, its dredging, its additional facilities, all of that appears to be only a climbing graph. Nothing appears to be a stabilizing graph, neither a downward graph. So we have doubts doubts over what is the vision for the city. And this doubt and this question mark need not be disconnected from the city to the coast and to the waters. If we do that, we will be falling short. We also know parallelly that there are many other designated authorities who otherwise are entrusted with these functions, statutory functions under the acts of the assembly of the parliament. So these are already there, and yet we have this newly created JMC given overwhelming and overriding powers over and above these. So the question comes that are we dismantling a democratic setup? Are we all the time looking at parallel authorities? And if the tourism sector needs such parallel authorities, then what happens to the designated authorities? What happens to the competency levels? Should the committee be revised, recomposed, or the committee be devalued in terms of the powers which are allotted to them? These are all the conflicts that arise in one's mind, because we are also trying to look at solutions. But because the whole policy is not visionary, even the solutions are short of even our understanding. So if the tourism committee needs to only look at cruise vessels, only look at management, because the original JMC 2016 was limited with only 2 powers. It had to look only at the Santa Monica management and resolve any conflicts. So if this was limited as that, why blow up that whole committee into jetties across the state? So this whole thing becomes a big question mark. And I'm sure you also will be able to stretch your brains to find some answers to that. We are also looking at these 2 words, which are quite dangerous: recommending and advisory. These 2 words also have been added with the JMC, besides all the powers that they can actually attempt to deliver. Recommending and advisory powers to the state government. So these are the questions: parallel authorities, overriding powers, advisory recommending powers, non-competencies, conflicts of interest. These are the issues that occur to us. One of the major areas besides the environmental and the carrying capacity aspect is the thing that affects each one of you, each one of us. Because infrastructure, the support structure which the city has, gets impacted. It's not just the biodiversity, it's not just the environmental aspect, it's not just the carrying capacity of the waters, it's the carrying capacity of the city as well. And the city has so much. Now, out of that so much, is it enough to what the city capacity is today, is the question. If it's enough, that little extra can be shared. If it's not enough, it has to decongest or add to that facility. In that plan of action, if we are adding more in terms of numbers who are going to depend on these facilities, and that too as a policy, as a document for the next so many years, then we have to have a rethink. Because this can't be a holistic vision for the city, and it can't be like a firefighting procedure. It has to be a planning procedure. That is the reason why even the land use planning is 10 years. Because that allows to governance to deal with the developing, emerging situations. So here we are looking at all of this and our present status. So whether the jetty policy will add to this, will stabilize it, or will decongest it is the question. Some visuals for you to identify where we are. If we are having parking problems, the residents have to deal with it. If we are having water issues, power issues, the residents have to deal with it. Pollution issues, garbage mismanagement, air pollution, land pollution, water pollution, residents have to deal with it. Visual stress, I do not know if we even count that as a stress, but we better start. We better start counting the visual stress as a stress that sinks into our health. And if these neon lights and all of that which happens on the waterfront, according to you, is stress, then we might as well count it, because a few generations afterwards are going to look back at us and wonder, why didn't we? So, rights of the residents over the waterfront, and not just the waterfront, over the water channel itself, because river in terms of transport is by right, was one of the public mode and even still is. So if the waterfront is going to be clogged out into this component of tourist, then how are we going to balance it out? Why are we needing dedicated outlets for tourists and not so dedicated outlets for the other public transport that we talk about? Residents' rights over jetties, over basic resources, economic benefits. Whether we are completely disconnected, even on that front, is a question. What are the economic benefits? Self-governance. So since JMC has overriding powers, I do not know the governance that the city residents elect in terms of corporators, what powers have been reserved for them so that they could take some good decisions on behalf of the people who voted them. So these are the issues, and if there are only costs, then this is what we have to think about, especially because it's a policy. It's a policy which is going to stay with us. Thank you.